The palace corridors were quiet, almost eerily so, as Queen Camilla prepared for what she believed would be a simple family conversation. But what unfolded would shake the very heart of her hopes. King Charles, the man she had stood beside through decades of public scrutiny, faced a decision that would ripple through her family, and one shocking choice left her staring at the guards in silent, unspoken heartbreak. How could love, loyalty, and duty collide so painfully within the walls of Clarence House? Tonight we uncover the story behind that unforgettable, emotional moment. Before we dive deeper into this royal drama, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. Every moment of this story is packed with emotion, tension, and humanity, and by joining our community, you'll never miss the stories that reveal the heart behind the crown. Hit that bell icon and let's get started. The morning sun cast a soft golden glow across the manicured lawns of Clarence House, painting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the stone pathways. Inside, Queen Camilla adjusted her pearl necklace, her fingers trembling just slightly, not from nerves alone, but from the weight of hope she carried. Today wasn't just another day in the royal routine. Today, she was on a mission. Her brother Thomas had returned to England after 15 years in Australia, and her nephew James, freshly graduated from Oxford with honors, dreamed of serving the crown. Camilla had spent weeks imagining this moment, rehearsing the perfect words, crafting her appeal to King Charles. As she walked through the familiar corridors, lined with portraits of stern-faced monarchs staring down at her, her heart raced. These walls had witnessed centuries of history, but today they would witness something more intimate, an intersection of love, loyalty, and the rigid demands of royalty. She entered Charles's private study, where the king was reviewing a stack of papers. The faint scent of Earl Grey tea mingled with the polished leather of the book-lined shelves. He looked up, a practiced smile on his face, yet there was something in his eyes, a subtle caution that made Camilla's chest tighten. "Darling, you look lovely this morning," he said, setting aside his documents. "You mentioned you had something important to discuss regarding your family." Camilla sank into the chair across from him, hands folded, voice steady despite the storm inside. "Charles, I know how busy you are, but I have a request that means the world to me. It's about Thomas and James." She spoke of Thomas's return, his desire to re-establish himself in London, and James's achievements at Oxford, his dream to contribute to the monarchy through genuine service. Charles listened quietly, but Camilla noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders. Every word she had prepared seemed fragile under the weight of his contemplation. "And Thomas?" Charles asked finally, his voice calm but measured. Camilla detailed Thomas's experience in public relations, and his wish simply to be acknowledged within the royal sphere, not given a title, not seeking fame, but a place to belong. She watched as Charles removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly, a telltale sign he was weighing more than just her words. "Camilla, you know how much I love you," he began gently, "and I respect your family. But the monarchy is in a delicate position. Every decision, every appointment, is scrutinized. We must be careful." The word careful hit Camilla harder than she expected. She had anticipated questions, perhaps requests for credentials, but not this implicit questioning of her family's worth. Her cheeks warmed, and for the first time doubt crept into her carefully rehearsed certainty. "I understand, Charles," she replied softly, "but surely there's room for qualified family members who want to serve. James isn't asking for special treatment. He's asking for a chance to contribute." A long silence fell over the room, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock. Camilla's heart pounded. She had stepped into this conversation with hope, yet the uncertainty in Charles's gaze made the walls feel smaller, the portraits more imposing. Could love and loyalty survive in a world ruled by duty and perception? For now the answer remained uncertain, suspended in the quiet, sunlit room of Clarence House.
The room felt heavier that afternoon, as if the sunlight itself had grown reluctant to enter. Camilla had hoped for understanding, for a flicker of willingness in Charles's eyes. Instead, what came was measured, deliberate, and almost clinical. Charles leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood desk, a silent metronome marking the tension between love and duty. "Camilla," he began slowly, his voice calm yet distant, "I understand your concerns. I understand your hopes for Thomas and James. But the monarchy, it is watched constantly. Every choice we make, every opportunity we extend, is scrutinized." The words felt like a wall between them, rigid and unyielding. Camilla's heart sank as she tried to process the reality. Her family's dreams, years of planning, studying, hoping, were being filtered through the lens of public perception. The very institution she had married into demanded sacrifices, not just from her, but from the people she loved most. "But Charles," she said, her voice catching slightly, "this isn't about nepotism. James is qualified. His professors have praised him. He wants to serve the crown, not chase titles or fame. Thomas simply wants to feel at home." Charles's gaze didn't waver, but a shadow flickered across his features. "I know you believe that, my dear, but appearances matter. Even the perception of favoritism could undermine the very trust we've worked decades to build. We cannot risk it. Not now." Camilla's chest tightened. The rejection was not just professional, it felt personal. Her nephew, her brother, people she had hoped to anchor closer to family, were suddenly outsiders again. And the man who loved her, who had promised partnership and understanding, seemed to see them only as potential liabilities. "So the answer is no," she whispered, barely above the ticking of the clock. Charles reached across the desk, taking her hand gently. "For now, yes, perhaps in time, we might revisit this. But the crown must come first. You understand that, Camilla?" She nodded, but inside, her heart ached. Outside, the distant sounds of London life continued unabated, oblivious to the intimate heartbreak unfolding within the palace walls. Later, in the solitude of her private sitting room, Camilla stared at her phone, knowing she had to call Thomas. How could she explain that a man who loved her had effectively deemed her family unworthy of the world she now inhabited? When Thomas's name lit up the screen, her chest tightened further. "Cam, how did it go?" His voice, full of hope, sliced through her already fragile composure. She swallowed, her words deliberate, careful. "It wasn't what we'd hoped, Thomas. Charles is worried about public perception. He feels any appointments within the royal household need to be beyond reproach. His concern that family involvement could be seen as favoritism." A long silence followed, and then, quietly, Thomas's voice broke through, heavy with resignation. "So, we're still outsiders, even after all these years." Camilla's heart shattered. The words she had feared to hear now echoed with cruel clarity. Even love, even loyalty, could not overcome the walls built by duty, tradition, and the weight of a crown. That evening, the palace corridors felt unusually quiet. Camilla moved softly, her steps echoing faintly against the marble floors, carrying the weight of disappointment like a cloak. Outside, the guards marched in their precise, unyielding rhythm, a constant reminder that duty and ceremony were never far from the royal household's heart. And yet, within these walls, human emotions ran just as deep, sometimes hidden, sometimes simmering beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to break free. Camilla found herself wandering toward the private study, a place where decisions of both love and power often collided. Charles was already there, reviewing documents with the same meticulous care he had displayed all day. But tonight, something had shifted. There was a tension in the air, yes, but also a flicker of reflection that Camilla hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking about what you said," Charles began, not looking up immediately, as if weighing his words against some invisible scale. "About fairness, about the people who matter to you, about your family." Camilla stopped mid-step, her breath catching. This was unexpected. She had prepared herself for argument, for polite dismissal, for the cold formality of duty, but not for honesty, not for the subtle acknowledgement that perhaps he understood the human cost of his decisions. "You're right," Charles continued, finally lifting his gaze. "I've been too rigid, too focused on appearances, on protecting the crown from criticism, when in truth, I've been protecting myself. Afraid to admit mistakes, afraid to open the doors fully to people I should have welcomed long ago." Camilla's heart softened, even as it ached. The man she had married, the king, the figure of authority, was confessing vulnerability, a rare glimpse of humanity beneath the layers of protocol and tradition. "I treated Thomas and James as potential complications," he admitted, his voice lower now, almost a whisper, "not as people who deserved the chance to prove themselves. I thought distance was safety, but all it did was create walls." The words hung in the room like a delicate crystal, fragile but shining with truth. Camilla felt tears prick her eyes, not just for the pain of the day, but for the years of unspoken misunderstandings finally surfacing. "I want them to feel they belong," she said softly, "not just tolerated, not just acknowledged from afar, just accepted." Charles leaned back, the weight of his crown momentarily forgotten in this quiet, almost intimate moment. "I see that now, and I want to do better. But it can't look like I'm simply yielding to pressure. We'll need a way to frame this that honors their merit and protect the institution's integrity." Camilla nodded, a small sense of hope stirring amidst the shadows of doubt. Perhaps there was a path forward, one that allowed love and duty to coexist without crushing dreams beneath the weight of tradition. Perhaps her family could finally find a place not just in her heart, but in the world she had come to inhabit. Outside, the palace lights glimmered against the London night, and the soft sound of the guards' footsteps echoed like a promise. Even in a world dictated by protocol, human connection could find its way, quietly, persistently, into the spaces that mattered most. 2 weeks later, the air at Clarence's house felt charged with quiet anticipation. Camilla had spent hours preparing the private dining room for a dinner that she had dreamed of for years, yet never fully believed would happen. The table was set with her favorite china, soft candlelight flickered across the room, and fresh flowers from the garden lent a personal warmth that formal arrangements could never match. Tonight, there would be no staff hovering in the corners, no formal agendas, just family, face-to-face, heart-to-heart. Thomas arrived first, his nervous excitement masked beneath a polite bow to Charles. The years spent apart had not diminished the hope in his eyes, and Camilla's heart clenched as she watched him step across the threshold. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had paused, waiting for the first words to be spoken. Charles, unusually casual in a sweater and slacks, greeted Thomas with a warm, tentative smile. "Shall we dispense with the formalities tonight?" he suggested. "Just Charles and Thomas, if that's all right." Thomas's relief was palpable. "I'd like that very much," he said, easing into a moment that had the potential to reshape relationships long strained by distance and protocol. The early moments of dinner were cautious, careful. Camilla found herself filling the silences, guiding conversations with subtle questions. But gradually, the tension began to lift, replaced by curiosity, laughter, and mutual respect. Charles inquired about Thomas's years in Australia, his business, the changes he had witnessed abroad. Thomas, in turn, showed genuine interest in Charles's environmental initiatives and the delicate balance of modernizing the monarchy without eroding tradition. And then, slowly, the deeper conversation began, one that Camilla had hoped for but never dared to expect. Thomas spoke of distance, of missing family, and of how his life overseas had been a self-imposed exile. Charles listened, genuinely, as though each word illuminated something in him he hadn't realized before. "I think I've been protecting myself," Charles admitted quietly, "keeping everyone at arm's length to avoid rejection, and in doing so, I kept the people I should have welcomed as family out." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, softened even the hardest edges of Camilla's lingering pain. Thomas, sensing sincerity, responded with warmth rather than judgment, breaking down invisible walls built over years. Stories were shared, laughter returned, and for the first time, it felt less like a royal obligation and more like the beginning of something genuine. By the time dessert arrived, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Charles acknowledged James's impressive qualifications and confirmed that his application to the royal household would be evaluated solely on merit. Relief mingled with gratitude in Camilla's heart, and she saw the beginnings of trust forming between her brother and her husband, a connection that once seemed impossible. As the evening drew to a close, the three of them stood at the front entrance. Thomas's words carried both humility and hope. "Thank you for giving us a chance, for giving us a place in your world." Charles's response was quiet but full of meaning. "Thank you for letting me do better." Outside, the London night was calm, but inside, something profound had shifted. A family, once divided by distance, misunderstanding, and duty, had begun the delicate dance of connection, trust, and acceptance, a dinner that truly changed everything. Weeks after that pivotal dinner, Clarence's house felt different. The air was lighter, conversations warmer, and the unspoken tension that once hovered between Camilla's family and Charles seemed to have lifted. What had begun as a cautious meeting over candlelight had blossomed into something real, a bridge built not of duty, but of trust. James, Camilla's nephew, now found himself walking the palace corridors not as a hopeful outsider, but as a young man being seriously considered for royal service. His application was scrutinized like any other: background checks, qualifications, interviews with senior staff. And yet, the difference was this: his name was no longer dismissed before it was even spoken. For the first time, he was being judged on merit, not on his connection to Camilla. Camilla watched him with pride, often recalling the look in his eyes when she told him the news. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper, a sense of belonging he had yearned for but never dared to believe possible. "It feels like I finally have a place, Aunt Cam," he had whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just because of who I'm related to, but because of who I am." Thomas, too, began to settle into his new chapter. No official titles, no grand announcements, but an invitation to family gatherings, dinners, and quiet moments that mattered more than any headline ever could. The years of distance were slowly being replaced by laughter, shared memories, and the healing balm of inclusion. He often joked that he felt like the uncle in the corner, but beneath the humor, his eyes reflected a quiet peace he hadn't known in decades. For Charles, the transformation was just as profound. A man long shaped by duty, tradition, and the constant gaze of the public had allowed himself to embrace something riskier: vulnerability. His willingness to soften, to open the gates even just a little, had not weakened the crown as he once feared. Instead, it had strengthened the bonds of those closest to him. And in doing so, it reminded him that leadership wasn't just about preservation, but about compassion. Camilla, standing at the heart of it all, felt a profound sense of relief. The battles she had once fought silently, the hope she had carried quietly in her heart, had finally borne fruit. Not through confrontation, not through demands, but through patience, honesty, and the courage to hold her ground when it mattered most. One evening, as a family gathered for another informal dinner, laughter spilling into the halls, stories echoing under the soft glow of chandeliers, Camilla glanced at Charles. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. This was not just a victory for her family. It was proof that even in the oldest institutions, change was possible when guided by love. The monarchy continued, as it always had, with ceremony and duty. But beneath the crown, within the walls of Clarence's house, a new chapter had begun, one written not by tradition alone, but by family, forgiveness, and the simple yet profound power of belonging.